Okay, enough of that. Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk about investment decision. I'm going to talk about the choice. Now, what is the single most important investment decision in your life? Maybe. My answer, education. An investment in yourself, probably the most important, the most useful or not, investment decision in your life. Okay, now let's do a quick poll now. How many of you now are in a profession that you studied for in your first undergraduate degree, your first bachelor's? Roughly a half or a bit less, right? More or less. Okay, according to hard data, poll of the last year, 43% of people in our country do not work in their profession, the profession they studied for. Does that make them a failure? Jānis Holstein's Goran Gora spoke today, and he said, well, he didn't get the musical training properly. He's a musician. Well, I got a music education. I'm not a musician. Does that make us both a failure? Probably not. Okay, now the question we're going to explore today is, how do we make this decision? How do we make the choice? How should we approach the problem? Okay. Now, there's one option, listen to others. A popular one, you could actually call it differently. I think that the typical way of calling this is common sense, right? Common sense, AKA listening to what others say, listening to what their experience has been, what their information is about what you should do. Now, some examples of common sense, you might hear this from your parents, from teachers, from your peers, from people you study with. Now, learn a good profession and you're set for life. Probably still true. I mean, we still need dentists, we still need lawyers, and all sorts of professional lives could still be true to that respect. Now, be good at something, not everything. Focus. Yes, but, and we're going to talk a bit more about that, if you're very focused, there are certain consequences to that. Now, one lifetime, one career. How real is this? Yesterday, as I was coming in at the opera house here, through the back door, I met a lady, and she still remembers me working here 12 years ago. She's still here. I've had 3 professions in the meantime. Now, I guess that depends, right? There's no one answer for everyone. So how could other people's information be so much useful to you? Okay, let's see the data again. Now, this is the comparison of future occupation preferences among high school students in Latvia. 50 years in between. 1965, last year. Stare at it for a second. Okay, I've done it easier for you. So doctors and pilots and creative professions, like artists and writers, show remarkable resilience. Okay, I understand about movie stars and doctors. Of course, pilots is cool. It's, I mean, all the sexy uniforms, you get to fly big planes. Not that we need many pilots, really, but that's kind of clear. Now, I'm actually a bit worried about these people here. We badly need them these days. They were popular in 1965. They're firmly gone. Engineers and scientists are firmly gone from the top choices in 2011. That's a problem. Now, another interesting thing is that these days we have still popularity of lawyers, financiers, PR people. Nothing wrong with that, but I guess we have produced far too many of these in the last 20 years anyway. And still young people's choices now reflect that old information. This is not very useful going forward. What else could you do? Instead of replicating other people's choices, of course. You could try and predict the future. With the information you've got, you could try and look ahead. You could try to extrapolate the past experience and predict what's going to happen. And you could. I mean, I already said engineers. I mean, if you want to become an engineer and it's good for you and you like it, you are probably going to be set for life. It's a good one. But should you become an engineer because it is expected that we'll need engineers? Let's see. Now, if you try and predict the main sectors of an economy and make it out, where should you invest in your education? Well, it's hardly very easy to do. Now, see what has happened to agriculture. It's gone down. It's not such a long period of time. It's gone down dramatically. Where is it going to go? Not much further. Manufacturing, well, decreased substantially. Given what I know as a Minister of Economy about economic policy of our country, where we are going, we're probably going to see more employment in manufacturing in the future, but not dramatically more, certainly not as much as in 1985. Now, what really worries me in this slide is the other. What is the other? That's everything else. That's where the growth is. That's where the creativity is. That's all the services sectors. That's where the ICTs are. Clean tech, green tech, whatever tech. All of these things are in this one aggregate other, and this would be so complicated now to tell what is going to happen, what specific skill sets you might need, what profession you might be in. So, not such an easy task to look at the past data and predict with what you know today what is going to happen. Some things you can predict, but certainly not everything. What else can you do? You can listen to yourself, talk to yourself. Now, should you meditate on your future profession? Not necessarily, but not that it's a bad idea. I mean, encourage you to do so. But the important thing is to find out what is it that you really want? What is it you think you could be good at? What do you enjoy doing? Now, I'm sure everybody has read or heard the Steve Jobs' famous Stanford graduation speech, right? So basically, what he did at a certain point in his education had no any hope of practical use at the time he did it. He just felt like doing it. Well, my jobs in moment came 6 years ago at Harvard when I decided to take an energy policy class with John Holdren, who is now Chief Scientific Advisor to Barack Obama. Now, there was no way of knowing for me at the time that today it will be half of my job content, energy. Back then, with all the public administration, leadership, all sorts of other classes that I took, all the economic classes, energy wasn't really an obvious one. So you never know. If you feel like it, chances are it's going to be useful. Skill versus competence. An old story, isn't it? Skills have been, and will be certainly useful. Now, but which should you invest in? Skills or broader competence? We've heard about the importance of philosophy, importance of humanities. Now, could it be that broader competences could actually be the way forward in an environment which we do not really predict? Okay, skills are going to be important. Skills like analytical skills, like math, might be useful to everyone to a certain degree. But at the same time, we clearly see that even in the professions which are lifetime careers, increasingly broad competences are very important. This is how you actually prepare yourself for various changes. Now, this is blah, 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 but let's look at the data. This graph, this analysis has been put together by a very interesting man, Professor Hanushek from Stanford University. I had the privilege of meeting him this year at the Munich Economic Conference. And he was talking about the different employment expectations which you might have given the general education or vocational education in your background. So basically, broader competence versus skill, specific labor market related skill. So apparently, shouldn't come as a big surprise, if you learn a trade, you learn skill set, which is specific enough, you easily you have 80% chance of getting quickly employed as you go out of school. With general education, it's much lower, comes up gradually. But look what happens towards the end of your career. With a specific skill set, it declines dramatically. Towards the end of your life, towards the retirement period, you're actually much more likely not to have a job. And it's the vice versa for a broader skill set. Well, I clearly agree. I mean, of course we need people in the professions, but I guess the challenge here is for people who get the skill sets early on to also learn, to get the competence of learning in midlife, to reorient themselves. So that's part of what policymakers really have to struggle with. There's a lot of uncertainty. There are various studies that indicate that about 40% of the jobs of tomorrow are, as of yet, unknown. We don't know what they're going to be like. So there's massive uncertainty about what you should do today to become the next Steve Jobs. Impossible to tell that. So is that a problem? Well, probably not. A famous professor, Richard Zethauser from Harvard University, has famously stated that unknowable situations have been and will be associated with remarkably powerful investment returns. Do you think the gentleman who lent money to Mark Zuckerberg, I think about 20,000 was it, and ended up with a couple of billion, did you think he expected it to happen? Maybe, probably not. Would you do it if you were asked by Mark Zuckerberg? Would you give him $20,000? You wouldn't? Okay. Probably I wouldn't either. Anyway, so this is the power of unknown. And that is also true about skills, about competencies, about choosing your education choices. So what is the point of reference here? We come back to the fact that the only point of reference is really yourself. Chances are, if you invest in yourself, invest wisely, you might be faced with massive returns. So obviously, as you think, as you see, I'm indicating that the first choice wasn't really choice, listening to others. The more you listen to others, the more difficult it is to decide for yourself. So there are really two choices. Investing into the known or investing into the unknown. One is related with probably lower risk, probably also low yield. Well, of course, you might strike gold and predict everything and do something that will probably happen, such as technological breakthroughs, etc. But in general, if you invest into the known, you have low risk, low yield strategy. If you invest in unknown, if you do it wisely, you don't have to be blind, you have to listen to yourself, that's probably a high risk and a very high yield strategy. So what is my recommendation? Get to know yourself. You have to know how much risk you're willing to take. You have to know how much peer group pressure you can take. People are going to talk to you and say that this is a foolish thing to do. In fact, Richard Zehauser said, if you haven't ever made an investment decision that looks like a foolish thing to do, you probably haven't really utilized your potential. Identify and develop your skill. With that, I agree. What could that skill be? Well, I think my skill is probably, whatever I do, NGO management, whatever it is, whatever I've done in my past, it's communication. Actually, I acquired a skill early in life, playing piano. Not very practical being a minister, not very practical in economic policy, but it has taught me certain competencies. A sense of form, spacing, rhythm, maybe patience, and certainly ability to communicate, reach out to people, get my message across in various ways. Another thing, get diverse experiences. You never know which experience is going to be useful. With hindsight, they all are. Whatever you've done, it has probably made you what you are today. So, you'll need courage. But if you want to do something that's never been done before, there's only one way. You have to do something that's been never done before. Thank you very much.